I wanted to make this video to help anybody who is actively looking for a job today and how to address interview questions. So this is our interview tip video. I've learned a couple things over 17 years of recruitment. And if you're currently actively right now looking for a job, you're probably going through a mixture of emotions. Bit of nervousness, excitement, or potentially fear. Hopefully these tips will help alleviate some of your fears or nerves and prepare you to do your best in that next interview setting. The number one thing you want to do in terms of an interview is really how do you answer interview questions. Most people will prep by canning answers that they prepare to deliver on particular questions. And that might be an okay strategy, but we don't think that's the best strategy in terms of how to address questions in an interview. What works really effectively is when answering a question is to answer the question directly and do it very concise. Then give an example, then paint the picture, then illustrate your point. A mistake a lot of people make is when they actually give an example first, paint the picture first before delivering the answer. It's really important that you address the question, then go forth and start to build the picture or really start to paint the story in terms of that particular answer. Next, in terms of, how to answer questions is always give real life examples. You don't want to be in an interview and give hypotheticals. This is what I might do. This is what I could do. You really want to talk about what you have done, how you have accomplished stuff. And so your examples need to be really firmly footed in the real world, that they're real examples. Third tip in terms of how to answer a question is don't give the same answer twice. And so you really want to look for a multitude of examples that you can give and potentially have a couple examples maybe to illustrate the same point. You don't always want to be reverting back to the same project or the same example to try to address all the questions that you're going to be asked in an interview setting. The next is, of course, this is a very easy tip, and it's an easy win, is smile and have fun. You're interviewing with a person, most cases will say today. And in doing so, you really want to be able to connect. A smile, a laugh, a bit of levity, connecting with the individual on a personal level will just help relax yourself and also will help relax the other person participating in the interview. The next is a tip that you could utilize not only in terms of interviewing, but throughout any portion or any part of your life where you find that you might be a bit stressed or overwhelmed. And that's really to take a deep breath before you answer a question and before you ask a question. This will help settle your nerves, organize your thoughts, and ensure that when you start to give that excellent example of how you're going to help a company make money, save money, or be more efficient, you're doing so in a place where you are fully in control of that response and how you articulate yourself in that interview setting. The final tip I'm going to give is the super tip. And this super tip is a tip that has never failed me in 17 years of recruitment. And that is the best candidates ask the best questions. So I'm going to give you an example just to kind of illustrate how powerful this is. Probably about a couple years ago, maybe close to half a decade, I had a candidate out for an interview. And I remember the VP of sales called me back and he's like, "Brian, this person interviews horrible." So of course, as a recruiter, my heart stopped. I was like, oh my gosh. And then he said, but he saved the interview when he started to ask us questions at the end. And he started to ask really intelligent questions that showed he did his research, questions that showed that they were relevant in terms of the content and the situation that he was interviewing for. So relevant in terms of his understanding if he was interested in the opportunity. The questions also demonstrated how he would operate in a business meeting or in a team discussion, talking about critical aspects of the business. Those questions in that interview saved him and he moved to the next round. That is how powerful great questions are. It is also a signal to me whenever I meet a great candidate, and if they're able to engage through questions, then I can tell that this is a really strong and incredible candidate. So there's a couple of questions or a couple of tips I'm going to give you in terms of asking a great question. The first one is a level of research. Great questions come from a deep level of research, not surface level, not linear type of research, but deep research, which is demonstrated by the type of questions that you ask. Next, the question is relevant in terms of the situation, the context in terms of your meeting, and also in terms of the participants in that meeting. Don't ask a question or a great question to the wrong person will end up being a bad question. So it's really important that as you develop these questions, you also have a clear understanding of your audience and will they care, or will this question excite them or get them talking more. The other aspect that makes a really great question is really around creativity, intelligence. And so it's about asking questions that folks don't typically get. And if you ask, an employer or a company a question they get all the time, you're likely going to hear a response they give all the time. If you ask a question they generally don't receive all the time, a bit of creativity, a level of intelligence, you will engage the audience. The final tip in terms of asking a great question or asking great questions in an interview is to prioritize and to be respectful for time. And so great candidates might come in with 5 or 10 questions, but throughout the interview, some of those questions will be answered. And at the end, they might only ask 3 to 4 questions or maybe 2, but they'll prioritize those questions in terms of importance and obviously will ensure that those questions are respectful for the time. These tips, I believe, will help you if you're interviewing today at any level. Do your best and actually showcase your skills. Hope you guys found a lot of value in these tips. And if there's other tips that I've missed or, that you think have served you well through recruiting or through interviewing or through advice from others, I'd love to hear and love to get some of those comments. So just post them below. Thanks, guys.